Was that an easy jump for you when you made that pivot?
No. It was gut-wrenching because that was the decision when I decided to leave American Eagle.
Yeah.
To have a family, because I was traveling 50, 60% of the time. It's like, that was my baby. I mean, those people were my family. That was a gut-wrenching decision that I will never look back because it opened up other doors. But these are hard choices that women are faced with.
Leaning closer. Your story, Mike and Scott.
Mike Lindstrom, my man, Scott Leese, What's Your Story podcast. Very special guest today. Very well decorated, too. I know you did your homework on this one.
Probably the most well-decorated guest we've had, I think.
Very impressive. I want to make sure I can get the title correct. Vice President of Advancement and Strategic Communications at Brophy Prep, which I know that school very well because my sons go there.
Can I tell everybody what my reaction was to that title?
Okay, tell me.
I said, that's a job title at a high school?
He literally said that, by the way. I literally asked that 10 minutes ago. We'll let her speak to this. Susan McGalla is our guest. She's a former CEO. She's worked in the NFL, branding, Wet Seal.
Retail.
Yeah. We can go on and on. She's going to talk about American Eagle Outfitter. She's going to go into all of that stuff. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This is very cool.
Yeah.
What a great way to end the day.
Our first questions is, what's your story?
Okay, let's go. I'm an Ohio girl. I grew up in East Liverpool, Ohio. I always say it's on the correct side of Ohio, on the eastern side. Actually was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan growing up. My dad was a football coach, a high school football coach earlier in his career, and we were a big sports family. And I had two brothers. I always like to say, I think that's part of my roots, my foundation is like good, wholesome upbringing, and I'm as comfortable around men and women, doesn't matter to me. We're all people. I grew up there and actually went to college in Ohio, University of Mount Union, the winningest college football program.
Really?
Yeah, that exists.
I know that.
Anyway, that was super fun.
D2 or D3?
D3.
That's quite an impressive stat.
So fun. And I was a cheerleader, so I had the best seat in the house on the sideline for 4 years for basketball and football. Majored in business and marketing and decided that I thought that this retail thing sounded cool. And I will say, and we may get into this later, but a lot of people get into fashion retail because of the fashion. I got into fashion retail because of the business. And I learned at a very young age you could be responsible for a lot of money and a lot of revenue. And I thought that was really inspiring to me. My first job was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that I took right out of college, and it ballooned from there. But I would say I'm one of those very, very lucky people that my first job in my career was one that felt like home and one that I was passionate about.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Where did you get that? Maybe it's genetic, nurture nature, as you say, when it comes to entrepreneurship. Was that something from your parents that you at a young age say, hey, this is something I could do? I mean, you're talking about some big responsibilities but you knew that at a very young age.
You know what? That's super funny because I have two brothers that are highly successful also, and we are all a little bit workaholics, but we're workaholics for the sake of, because we're passionate about what we do. I have a brother that's a doctor and another one that's an attorney. So I don't know. Our dad was a hard worker, but always home for us. We kind of turned that on its ear and took it in a whole nother direction. My siblings and I sort of were all cut from the same cloth for some reason.
Did you do retail as your first job way back in the day?
I did. That was my first
What was it? What was
Was it?
Folding clothes in the
No,
store?
so, it was funny. Back in the day when I was leaving college and getting into retail, one of the major department stores in Pittsburgh was called Joseph Horne. And we had what was considered one of the Harvards of retail training. So I had heard it was an amazing training program and accepted that role after college. I was one of 40. It's funny because one thing I do remember for anybody out there who is getting started at a young age, I came home. My mom stayed with me for about a week in Pittsburgh to get me acclimated and settled. And I came home after the first day and I said to her, I'm going to get fired. I was totally intimidated by these 40 people who came from all over the country, some of the best schools, and I thought, what am I doing here? Am I going to be able to hang with these people? And I ended up doing okay, but we all get intimidated by certain things, and it takes us all a little bit of time sometimes to find our own. It ended up working out okay. We had a great early career there, but back then, the retail was consolidating, and a lot of stores were buying each other out. I was actually going to move for another position for a company that bought out Joseph Horne's in Pittsburgh. That is when American Eagle came knocking on my door.
Wow.
And whatever, it's serendipity.
How old were you at this time?
Oh my gosh, I would have been about 27, 28 years old.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah, they came knocking, and I will tell you, the other cool thing is, I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen where you had to make a choice. They offered me a position, but I had to take a step back in role and in status and in title to do this. But I had belief in kind of what that company could be, and it was all about private label, making your own product, having a design team. We didn't buy from vendors. We largely made all of our own product. And I thought, that's something I don't know. It's something I can learn, and I think it's the future. I took a little humble step and said, okay, I don't care about my title. I want to come and do this.
Are you paying attention now to retail in the direction and the trends, or do you find yourself totally removed and like that's in the past?
It's funny. I would tell you, I'm sort of built that way. I can't not pay attention. And there's so many exciting things happening in the retail landscape today, but very different things happening. I wouldn't tell you I wish I was doing that today. But first of all, I'm the proud mama of American Eagle. I root for them. I'm so proud of what they're doing right now in so many facets of what American Eagle stands for. But I wouldn't tell you I wish I was doing that right now at this stage of my career. It's very different. Yeah. A lot of things are about price again. We were pioneers when I was at American Eagle in the online space. We totally embraced that. We grew faster. We were 20% of revenue before a lot of people even got into the online space. But that's gone to a whole new level with the Amazons of the world and fast fashion and things like that.
Yeah.
Then the next chapter was Wet Seal, right? This was like a
long chapter after that, because when I was at American Eagle, we were one brand. By the time I left, we were 4 brands, and we went from $300 million in revenue to $3 billion in revenue. And at American Eagle, we were the most profitable store in mall-based retailing, really outside of Apple. So not only were we growing rapidly, but we were growing profitably. So that was a big chunk of 15 years of my life at that company. But I left to have a family because I was traveling like crazy and wanted to have children. So I gave them 6 months notice, and 3 months in, became pregnant with my son, Nico, who actually goes to Brophy. Yeah. That's why I left that role. And anyway, so I was kind of being my mom and doing consulting for a year, Wall Street and private equity consulting.
What if you can, I don't even know how this is possible to answer this question, but if you can distill down how you grew from 300 million to 3 billion, I think is what you just said. Simplify it down to, we did these 1, 2, 3 things ruthlessly, efficiently, well.
Okay, yes, I can. First thing, we weren't afraid to dream. We, and still are, the #1 jean brand for 15 to 25-year-olds. And when I was there and we had the dream that we could be that, people laughed. I mean, we weren't even on the radar, but we believed in the denim business, we believed in the jean business, and we believed in young people that were 15 to 25 that were the core of the brand. So we dared to dream. It took about 3 years, and we made it. That was crazy to have that kind of leaps and bounds growth and succeed in that way. So #1, don't be afraid to dream. #2, do it in a fiscally responsible way. So many people in so many businesses, not just retail, you have to dream and you have to invest, but you have to believe that you know what the exit plan is if things don't work. And highly leverage new ideas with our successful ideas to grow profitably. We really, as we started to really find our rhythm, weren't doing it in a way that was putting our master
At risk.
company at risk. So that's number 2, do it responsibly. I think the third thing is stay small as you grow. I would say that to the teams all the time. How do we stay small as we grow? And our way of doing it was the belief in people. People mattered. They never stopped mattering. I believed in personal connections with people, personal training, giving them your time. Probably my meetings at American Eagle were too big because I wanted people to learn. So I would always bring people in. Even the very, very young people, they had something to say. They had something to contribute. So I would think that would be kind of the third thing.
The ride from 300 to 3 billion has got to be so much fun and just like serotonin overdose. All I can think of as I think about that is, where is their motivation to try to capture that again? That's like lightning in a bottle type moment. Mm-hmm. I've had a few things on such a minor scale compared to that, and it was so much fun. And I find myself on the other side going, am I ever going to get that feeling again?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I guess there was just so little ego about it. How do you get that again? You get that again by finding things you're passionate about, because that was really the high of it all, is being passionate about the main brand and then saying, okay, we believe that there's a way to do the intimate apparel business that's different from what Victoria's Secret's doing. They're wonderful. They were a great competitor, but we had the Aerie brand that was born, and so it was the passion in that. It's almost like it wasn't about how big, it was about how well and what we believed in, and I find that same satisfaction today in the work that I do. It's just about caring. It's about being passionate.
When we talk to other moms that are faced with that decision that you talk about, how is that for you? I mean, you're like, okay, I want to have a family now. It's time for me to take off this professional hat and go be a mom. And was that an easy jump for you when you made that pivot?
No. It was gut-wrenching because that was the decision when I decided to leave American Eagle.
Yeah.
To have a family, because I was traveling 50, 60% of the time. It's like, that was my baby. I mean, those people were my family. That was a gut-wrenching decision that I will never look back because it opened up other doors. But these are hard choices that women are faced with. And I had a husband that was 50-50 with me. I mean, he met me halfway, and it wasn't like I was on my own with all the typical mom type experiences. But you have to be brave. You have to kind of think deep. And the decision that was right for me might not have been right for somebody else. But for me, it certainly was, because it opened up other doors, and all these other cool things I've done wouldn't have happened if I would have made that brave choice.
Yeah.
It kind of worked.
And then how about now, fast forward, with the job you have now and being a mom?
My God.
You're not on the road, right? You're not on the road.
First of all, how cool is this? All right, I'm at Brophy, and I'm in my office, and my son goes to school there and is in and out of my office during the day. He comes in for snacks and food usually. Okay?
Just like at home.
Yeah, right, just like at home. I now have a refrigerator, and he brings in his buddies, and they leave sticky notes on my computer. Like, it's such joy. And my daughter is now a rising sophomore at Xavier Prep, which is right next door, and she comes over after school. So here I am. I have this passion that was a very big decision for me, and this is not a 9-to-5 job, though. This is a 60-hour-a-week at least job, but I still see my family and I see my kids, and they're proud of me. Like I had said to my son, actually, I said, look, you were at Brophy first. If this is weird that mom's going to be down on campus, like, I will not do this. And he's like, no, this is cool.
Wow.
Like, you should do
That's
this,
great.
and this is for you. So anyways, being a mom and doing this, I'm almost glad. The kids now they knew what I did years ago, and some pretty impactful things that I was able to accomplish with great teams. But now they're seeing me reinvent it, and I'm happy. I'm happy for that.
That's awesome.
great.
Yeah.
I can see this from my viewpoint because Monica is part of the Moms Guild, as you know.
Talk about an accomplished woman. I love your wife.
I appreciate that.
I love your
But
wife.
we have a basement in our home. I basically call it the Brophy basement because it's got crafts. She's making stuff all the time. She's part of Colt's acting stuff, but
Gosh.
she echoes exactly what you
bleeds
said.
Brophy.
Yeah,
Monica bleeds
she
Brophy.
loves being around. You ask Greta or Colt, like, mom's around quite a bit, but she loves it, and that's her connection
That's
to
her
it.
connection.
100%.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't change it.
I identify with that a lot. Yeah, I love it.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. So tell us about, he made a joke about it, but he did ask that question
I did.
about Brophy. Tell us about that role, because you look at it and go, I got this job here, and it's so gratifying in so many ways because it's an amazing school, as you well know. But you've been so up there. How do you reconcile that? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and what's the juice that you get from it.
Well, let's start with the passion piece, right, Scott? How do you get lightning in a bottle, and where's the passion? Well, I was pretty much retired after doing several things, even since American Eagle, and I was really doing board work and was retired and thought I'm going to be a great mom for my kids. And the funny thing about it is, I like to say this, and it's actually quite true, is my son got me a job and brought me out of retirement because I was down at Brophy, my husband and I, actually in a meeting with our president, Bob Ryan. Bob learned a little bit about my background, and on the way out of the meeting, he grabbed me and said, "Would you be a guest speaker in my class?" I teach an entrepreneurial class to the juniors and seniors at Brophy. My son was a freshman at the time. I said, oh my gosh, I've done that. When I was at American Eagle, I did it all over the country for Ivy League schools, the best of the best schools. And the reason, I'll tell you why I even bring that up. A year or so ago, it was a January day, and I came and was a guest speaker at this class of 28 boys. And I cannot tell you guys, I stood there, I got chills. Speaking, interacting, and engaging with these 28 boys in that room. They had all researched me. There was not one kid looking out the window, not engaged. They were excited about learning. They had questions, college level questions that they were asking. And I thought, if this is what this school does, and this is what my son is going to look like in 4 years, this is the gift of a lifetime that I am giving my child, to be part of this institution. I walked out of there, I was blown away, and Bob walked me to my car and said, I have a crazy idea, but would you ever consider getting more involved here? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Sure, I'd be happy to get more involved. You want me to what do you want me to work in the cafeteria? What can I do? He brought up this role, and he's a very persuasive guy, but
Yes.
I came back 4 months later and took this job because I'm passionate about what we do.
Wow.
People say to me all the time, like, why? And that's why.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, and the gentleman that she brings up, Bob Ryan, this guy, you have to think about this. You're the leader at Brophy. You know everybody. The alumni, the famous people, the Donovan McNabbs of the world, the people that go to that school, they're all his friends, but he's always got to be on. I told him that when I first met him. I go, man, you're good.
He's so
You're
good. It's funny because people say to me, look, you've run things. How do you go and work for somebody again? It's got to be somebody you respect.
Yep.
And this Bob is so bright and has such a passion and vision for Brophy. But you know what's funny? There are some famous people and very accomplished families that are a part of the Brophy community. But there are so many things about Brophy that I have learned that are part of the value of that school that people don't know. A third of our students are on financial aid. The complexion of Brophy mirrors Maricopa County.
Yeah.
The amount of diversity that we offer there is amazing. For example, last year, we spent $6.8 million in financial aid to make Brophy accessible to everybody that deserves to be at that school. It doesn't matter what type of student you are there. The fact that you belong and the fact that this type of diversity works as a community and as a brotherhood, you are getting a prequel to a college education and college experiences before you even go in terms of dealing with that type of dimension and that type of different views. And somehow at Brophy, the magic of it works in such a respectful way. Those are the things about Brophy that Bob Ryan leads and the team, Jim Bopp, who is our principal, that they lead in our school. And that's why I came out of retirement.
Yeah.
I am just so passionate about helping them.
So what is the role? Because
My role?
I hear the title and I'm like,
You're like,
what does that mean?
What is
What
that?
does that mean?
What do you think advancement is?
I honestly have no idea. All I can think of it is advancing the brand of the school, the reach of the school, the impact of the school, things of
Right.
that nature.
Advancement means basically development or fundraising. I have a team, a very talented, very small, mighty team of fundraisers that work to develop relationships and raise funds for the school so that we can do things like give away almost $7 million of financial aid, but also help to move the school forward. So that's part of my team. The other part of my team is marketing and communications, making sure the Brophy brand is clear that it's understood. The fact that we're the only Catholic Jesuit high school in Arizona, and that next year we're going to be approaching our centennial, 100 years. That's a big deal in Arizona.
Yeah, it is.
And how do we make sure that we market and communicate the fact that we're going to be a 100-year-old institution that started in 1928, and we provide a Catholic Jesuit education that is in so many ways unparalleled in terms of the experiences and the opportunities that are provided. That's done in that portion. And then I have the events team that, oh my gosh, they're the little engine that could. And we do, almost 20 events a year, but 4 major events that bring our community together in a way that people share. This community loves to stay in touch. They like to be a part of things. So I have a team of people that make sure that that happens. It's very dynamic, the role, and it's been a lot of fun.
Was there somebody in that role before, or did they create that role, especially for someone like you?
There was somebody who at one point ran advancement, but the kind of complexion of all of these kind of being together in this certain way is a little unique now with my background and what I brought to the table. But I have a little factoid for you, and I'm very proud to step into her shoes. But our previous president, Adria Ranke, she's beloved in Arizona. Earlier in her career, she was vice president of advancement and then stepped in and became the president of Brophy. And then Bob took over for her about 3.5 years ago. So there are versions of that role that did exist.
You said something about earlier that it was kind of a subtle thing, but you like sports.
Love sports.
You had another stop-off point here, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I did.
You got to talk about that for a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
Susan's had so many different careers.
I know.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
I don't know. I'm so blessed about it, I have to tell you, right? So this one was crazy. I came back from California. I was running a company out there and brought my family back, had 2 little small children. I'm a golfer. I love to golf. And I was back in Pittsburgh with my family maybe for 2 weeks, and I am good friends with David Morehouse, who used to be the CEO of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And he invited me to be in his foursome at a Penguins golf fundraiser. So in my foursome was myself, David Morehouse, Art Rooney of the Steelers, and Jimmy Sacco, I think, of the Steelers was there too. That was super fun. Then the next week, I had known Art Rooney because I was running American Eagle in Pittsburgh, and so we're 2 leaders of organizations in Pittsburgh. He gave me a call and asked me if I'd be willing to take on a little project there to assess what's happening in the business side and how we work with the league, things like that. And the long story short of it, that was like a 9-month project that I did as a consulting gig, and that turned into them creating a role for me where I was running, again, a big part of the business side of the Steelers. But that was so much fun. I mean, to combine business and sports was nirvana for me.
Dream.
Super fun.
That's
super
so
fun.
cool.
I traveled with the team,
so cool.
Went to a lot of the away games with the team and the players and got to know them, and kind of reinvented at the team level, really using the players as part of our marketing. So I got to know a lot of them and just lots of good people.
I read that you're responsible, at least partially, for the Unite. What is it?
Steelers Nation Unite.
Steelers Nation Unite.
Yes, our
Is that
loyalty
true?
program. It is true.
That was you?
It is true because, you know, the one thing is, and this is a very important thing in sports today, because you can say you have big waiting lists, for those of us that were fortunate enough to have waiting lists for our stadiums and things like that. But loyalty is vastly changing in the sports environment because it is becoming so compelling to watch sporting events from home.
Yeah.
On a Sunday, when you want to watch on TV and see 4 to 6 different games going on at once, and we had 17 million fans worldwide at the Pittsburgh Steelers, how do we get to know and become personal with those 17 million fans? Any sporting team should be thinking this way because you want to establish loyalty. You want them to know you care. You're part of loyalty programs, and many of your retail, Amazon's the prime example, right? Amazon Prime. Coming from the retail space and developing loyalty programs at American Eagle and other places I've been, we came up with the concept of a leading loyalty program in the NFL. It was cool.
Neat.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
How do you think about goals in your life anymore? I'll give you an example. I think about things in 5-year chunks. I'm 53, so my next stop's 55. I think about, okay, where do I want to be by 55? That's how I do it. How do you do it?
You know what? This was a big call for me to come back and to take this role at Brophy.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that I think people would say was expected or anything like that. But for me, my big call at this point, I am fortunate enough to have the choice what to do at this stage of my life. And my choice was to come back and to serve in something that I really cared about, that I felt was affecting young people. And if you look, a common thread of my entire career is young people.
Yeah.
I mean, American Eagle,
the brands.
the brands were young. Football was pretty youthful. I was very involved with the young players at a point in time when they would come out of the draft, and on the marketing side and helping to protect them. And this stop for me, it may be smaller in scale, but it's just as big in impact as anything I've ever done. When I think of that, the other part is I want to use my brain. That's really important to me, to keep learning. I want to learn, and I am learning. This is a dynamic role. I've never worked in academia on the inside. This is a world-class team. You look at Bob Ryan and Jim Bopp and the team that's assembled there. There may be teams as good across the country. I don't know any that are better. I'm learning academia, but also in my board work, that's really important to me too, because that business mind of mine, I like to put to work. As a matter of fact, I'm doing something really cool. I can't talk too much about it right now, but there's a de novo bank, a new bank getting started, and I'm very honored I was asked to serve on the board of this bank. I'm like, why do you want me? So that's going to be public here in the next few weeks or whatever, but I like to use that side of my brain as well.
What nonprofits outside of the things you do with Brophy have you been involved with?
Oh my goodness, a lot of them. Probably one of the most spectacular experiences was I was a part of McGee Women's Research Institute, and they happen to be based in Pittsburgh. They are the largest funded women's research institute for women's health in the world.
Wow.
I was asked to serve on the board, and it's a philanthropic board, but actually the CEO reports into us. That's very unusual. Typically, those philanthropic boards are just fundraising boards. I did that work for 9 years, and I helped them with a national rebrand. But oh my goodness, it was so humbling to learn the good work of these doctors that are brilliant in changing the face and the accessibility of women's health throughout the world. So I've done a lot of really cool nonprofit work in cancer. I was on the board of trustees at the University of Pittsburgh. That was a big honor. There are probably too many to count, but the one that I told you about is kind of near and dear to my heart.
Tell me about some influences outside of your family, like mentors. When you were on the come up, anybody in your life, you say, hey, this is somebody that I met at this juncture of my life or career, and they had an impact on you. And if you have mentors or people that influenced you, what'd you learn from them?
You know what's funny? I don't know if you guys think, you're very accomplished people too. Mentors can be positive mentors, and mentors can be people that have influenced you in ways also that you want to do things differently. It's not that you don't respect them. And I've had a little bit of both of those. But in terms of mentors outside of my family, I would probably tell you one of the people that has had the biggest impact on me was when I was president of American Eagle and the CEO. He saw something in myself that I didn't even see in myself. And isn't that cool? Because we can all be type A, accomplished, have goals, want to achieve, and want to move forward. But he's the one who said to me, I think you can run this company. And that's where I started to learn. And boy, he started to step back and let me take the lead in a very proud way. There was no competitive nature there. I learned from him not only specifically for me and my path, but what I want to give to other people. And
well, that's a gift in and of itself,
isn't it?
For somebody to not only have that belief in you, but actually articulate it to you.
Articulate and say, hey, look, like, what do you want to do? And I tell him, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if you're reaching high enough.
Yeah.
Wow.
How, like, right?
Yeah.
He wanted me to reach high enough into his job. Doesn't that take somebody with a lot of self-confidence and belief and care about developing others? I hope I've done that throughout my career for other people, because yes, there's the mentor and how do you succeed, but there's this poem from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I have it on my desk at home and my wall at work, but it's basically, if I've touched a life, that's the meaning of success.
Yeah.
And I learned that from Jim O'Donnell, who was the CEO at American
Is
Eagle.
Jim still part of your life? Or did you...
Well, I haven't talked to him in a little bit of time now, but yeah, he and I have always somewhat kept up over the years. Yeah, he's special.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'd like to do a couple rapid fire questions, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay.
All right. So
all right, put my seatbelt on.
I got to ask you this one, because you have so much leadership in your genes. Best leadership book that you've ever read? Or professional book that you read that
you
had
want me
a
to
really
be super honest?
Yeah.
I have read some. I am not a big professional self-help book gal.
Really?
I am not.
Really?
And there are good ones. I'm not going to say, like, the one that probably, I don't know if this was written as a self-help book, but Steve Jobs' book. in terms of inspiring me as a leader and how to, like, the guy was crazy, but brilliant people are crazy.
Yeah.
I mean that in a most respectful sense of the word. But I would tell you from a professional career standpoint, I learned the most out of that book. I am more about being in it than reading and applying.
She's a doer.
I'm a doer, and I'm a learner
stuff
from
done.
real life experiences.
Yeah.
That's my honest answer
love
to
it.
that question.
You're well traveled. Your favorite place to travel to?
Can I tell you where I like to eat
Yeah.
the most?
Yeah.
Italy. I like to eat the most in Italy, for
Got
sure.
a favorite
Like,
place for certain things.
yeah. Like at breakfast, you think about lunch. At lunch, you think about dinner. And at dinner, you talk about breakfast the next day. That's Italy, right? Like, and those people, oh my gosh, wonderful. But I would tell you my favorite special place in the world is the Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah.
Wow.
Really cute story I have to tell you. I want to make sure I'm not having
we're
us
good.
run over. We're good. I was gone for 3 weeks. I was in India. I was here. I was there. Traveled overnight to the Philippines. Exhausted. It was myself and a coworker. She and I were in a car ride to our hotel in the middle of the night. And I got out of the car in Manila. And the car driver said to us, he shook us real gently, woke us up. We get out, we're blurry-eyed, haven't been in the United States for 21 days. It's our last stop. And he said something to me, and I was like, wait, what did you say to me? And he said, I wish you the most blessed of trips here in the Philippines, my lady. It was so sincere, and I will tell you that the, 3 days I spent there, the kindness and the authenticity of the Filipino people left such an impact and a mark on me. So that was the
Very
most
cool.
special trip I ever had, and it was the kindness and
I love it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love it.
it's really beautiful, beautiful people.
Quote you live by, or mantra or belief that you have that's strong, that you pushed off to your kids, it's something that you stand firm on?
We have a family motto that we say to our kids, especially up through middle school, every day when we drop them off at school. And it was, be kind, be respectful, and spend the time to meet a new person each and every day. And that's what if my kids, if you said, what's your family stand for? They would say, my parents have this family mantra, and they could repeat it to you verbatim, and we would say that to them when they would
Love
get out
that.
of the car every day.
I love that.
And so
The last one is a good one. The last one is arguably the hardest one.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that, right? How do you seek somebody out that needs to be sought out or noticed?
Every day.
And
That's
Yeah.
a tough one. Especially if our kids are their comfort zone.
Yeah.
They have their people.
It's hard
They
enough
have their
for-
BFFs.
hard
They don't
enough
wanna
for
go
me to
off
do that.
And that's one thing the school does a very good job. I remember when Rhett was a freshman there the first week.
At Brophy.
Yeah, at Brophy. I asked him what would have been one of the first things you learned this week. And he says, one of the coaches had caught a kid. There was trash sitting on the ground. And he said, yeah, that trash is your trash. If there's trash on the ground, you pick it up.
Absolutely.
Period. You walk around that school, you'll see people just walking.
100%.
That stuck with me to the point where I'll be sitting there in a parking lot and I'll pick up trash because that's my trash.
Right.
It's taking
Oh,
responsibility. And
you're
it
100% right. And when I'm walking the campus with Bob Ryan, he's picking up trash and telling the kids to do that.
Yep.
So that still plays 100%
That's a small
real
thing,
today.
but that's a big thing.
It
That's
is a big thing. You care. How about this week at the World Cup?
Oh, I saw
Japan.
that.
Japan cleaning up in a stadium in America. They would not leave the Japan fans and some of the players, I believe,
Yeah.
for soccer, did not leave the stadium until they cleaned up that stadium.
Yep.
But isn't that a wonderful
Such
thing?
a cool thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see there's a picture. I think it was Jameis Winston.
James
was there?
Winston
Oh,
was
James
doing it.
He was there,
He was
and
picking
a guy in
it
a
up, too.
wheelchair.
He was with them.
Going around, a guy in a wheelchair picking up trash, and he jumped in. He goes, if this guy's, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I should be doing
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Gotta lead by example.
Yeah, so cool.
So good. Listen, I know you got places to be. You've taken so much time, and we really appreciate the
Guys, I'm
opportunity.
so honored that you asked me to
Yes.
come,
Yeah.
and you made this super fun, super easy. I hope it was.
It's great. Oh, it's perfect. It was perfect. I always say the same thing. Wish we had more time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
All right.
much for
Thank
coming
you
on.
very much.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Signing off. Mike Lindstrom, Scott Leese. What's your story? Thank you. Hey, everyone. Mike Lindstrom here. Thanks for tuning in to What's Your Story with Mike and Scott. Make sure to hit the subscribe button for new episodes every Tuesday morning and check out a few of our previous episodes below. We'll see you next time.